The night was long, the cafe nearly empty, and yet her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Sophia wiped down the same wooden counter for the 5th time, her eyes stinging from the exhaustion of another 14-hour shift. Her back ached, her legs felt like stone, and the constant hum of voices and clinking dishes had long blurred into a hollow sound in her mind. She wasn't just tired, she was drowning. Every hour she worked was already spent before she earned it, swallowed up by bills stacked on the kitchen table, by rent overdue, by medical expenses for her younger brother who had been born with a weak heart. She carried the weight of 2 lives on her narrow shoulders, and though she smiled when customers looked her way, her smile was more fragile than glass. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of small acts to change lives, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Spark. Your support helps us bring stories like this to light, stories that remind us of the humanity we all carry inside. Sophia wasn't always this tired. Once, not too long ago, she was a girl with dreams as wide as the sky, who studied hard with the hope of becoming a nurse. She imagined herself walking hospital corridors in a clean white uniform, helping people heal, giving comfort in moments of pain. But dreams, as she learned, can be expensive. When her father died suddenly, and her mother slipped into a depression that left her unable to work, Sophia's path shifted overnight. She dropped out of nursing school and stepped into the first job she could find, waiting tables in a cafe that smelled of burnt coffee and grease. She thought it would be temporary. Just a year, she told herself. Just until things got better. But a year turned into 3, and better never came. The bills never stopped arriving. Her brother's prescriptions became more expensive. Her landlord never stopped knocking at the door. And she, day by day, felt her dreams dissolving into the background like chalk washed away in the rain. That night, the cafe was quieter than usual. A few students sat hunched over laptops, their faces lit by the bluish glow of screens. An elderly couple whispered to each other in the corner, their fingers laced together like they had been for decades. And then there was the man in the worn-out jacket sitting alone near the window. Sophia noticed him because he had been there for hours, sipping slowly on a single cup of coffee, writing in a notebook with pages filled with messy scribbles. He looked tired too, but not in the same way. His eyes were sharp, observant, as though he carried stories inside him. Sophia tried not to stare. She moved through her routine like clockwork, refilling water glasses, clearing dishes, forcing a cheerful tone whenever she greeted customers. But the truth was, she hadn't eaten all day. She had given her last few dollars to buy her brother's medicine. Her stomach growled, her head spun slightly, yet she kept moving. That was survival. As the night drew closer to closing time, she went to clear the man's table. His notebook was closed now, his coffee cup empty. She offered her usual polite smile, thanked him for coming, and carried the cup away. But something about his expression lingered in her mind. He had looked at her, not in the careless way most customers did, but with a kind of quiet noticing. As though he saw not just the uniform or the forced smile, but the exhaustion hidden underneath. She brushed it off. After all, customers came and went. No one ever really saw her. Not truly. She went back to wiping down tables, stacking chairs, preparing to lock up. It wasn't until she returned to the register that she noticed the check. He had paid for his coffee, of course, but what made her stop breathing was the tip. Folded beneath the receipt was a wad of cash, far more than she had ever seen left behind. She counted quickly, her hands shaking. $200. For a cup of coffee that cost less than $3. Her first instinct was panic. Surely this was a mistake. Maybe he had left it accidentally, maybe he'd come running back in. But no, on the back of the receipt, in rushed handwriting, were words that made her eyes blur with sudden tears. You look like you're carrying more than most people could bear. This won't fix everything, but maybe it can lighten the load, even for one night. Don't give up. You're stronger than you think. She sat down right there on one of the cafe chairs, holding the receipt like it was something sacred. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, her breath catching in the back of her throat. For the first time in months, she let herself cry, really cry. Not the silent tears she shed in the shower, not the quiet weeping into her pillow. This was different. It was release, it was gratitude, it was the sudden overwhelming realization that someone, a stranger, had seen her when she felt invisible. That night, she didn't go straight home. She stopped at the grocery store, and for the first time in weeks, she filled a basket with real food instead of instant noodles. She bought fresh fruit for her brother, milk, bread, even a small cake to surprise him. She also tucked away part of the money to pay a sliver of the overdue rent. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to give her a breath of relief, like surfacing from water after nearly drowning. But more than the money, it was the message that transformed something deep within her. Those words, "Don't give up," echoed in her mind long after the cash was spent. They lit a spark she thought had died. And in that fragile spark, Sophia began to dream again. Over the next weeks, she found herself looking differently at her life. The exhaustion was still there, the long hours didn't vanish, but she began setting aside small amounts of money, even if it was just a few dollars from each paycheck. She started looking into community programs that offered scholarships for night school. The road was still impossibly hard, but suddenly, there was hope stitched into the fabric of her days. Months later, Sophia enrolled in a part-time nursing course. It was slow, it was grueling, and many nights she studied by candlelight after her brother fell asleep. But she didn't stop. Because she remembered that someone had believed in her when she had nearly stopped believing in herself. Years passed, and eventually, Sophia did walk the hospital corridors in a clean white uniform. She became the nurse she once dreamed of being, the one who offered comfort and strength to others. Every time she leaned over a patient's bed, every time she held someone's hand during their hardest moments, she carried the memory of that stranger's kindness with her. She never saw the man in the cafe again. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he came from, or why he had chosen that night to leave such a gift. But in her heart, she silently thanked him every single day. Because one small act of kindness had been the seed that grew into an entire new life. And in her own way, Sophia paid it forward. When she saw a young woman struggling to buy food in the grocery line, she quietly slipped a bill into her hand. When she noticed a student working 2 jobs just to keep up with tuition, she shared her story and encouraged them to keep going. Her life became not just about surviving, but about passing on the hope she had once been given. Sometimes, it only takes one act, one gesture, one stranger to remind us that even in our darkest moments, we are not invisible. Sometimes, a simple tip left on a table can be the start of a miracle. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Spark. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who may need the reminder that kindness still exists in the world. And before we end, I have a special request for you. Please comment below with the words, "Kindness can change lives," if you believe, like Sophia learned, that even the smallest act can leave an everlasting impact. Because maybe one day, your words, your actions, your kindness will be the reason someone else finds the strength to keep going.